Hello and welcome to South Asia Chat, a podcast series brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. The Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan Party, or the TLP, has emerged as an important political organization in recent times. It has been in the news mainly due to its recent protests against France and the untimely death of its leader, Khadim Hussain Rizvi. To tell us more about the political role of the TLP and other Islamic groups in Pakistan, we have with us Dr. Iqbal Singh Sevea, a visiting research associate professor at ISAS. He teaches history at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, with a research focus on modern Islam and modern South Asia. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Iqbal.
It's my pleasure.
So I'd like to start by asking you about the TLP. The TLP recently organized protests against France, but could you tell us a little bit about its ideology, origin, and how it is different from other Islamic groups in Pakistan?
Sure. The TLP, or the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, is a movement that first came to light in 2017. And I'm giving a little bit of historical backdrop to its emergence here. It emerged in 2017 when it organized a 3-week long dharna or sit-in in Islamabad, in which it opposed certain changes that were introduced by the government in the electoral forms, the forms one fills up to stand for elections. The key issue there was the TLP argued that the changes in the form, or rather the way in which the forms were now printed in 2017, seemed to water down the statement that one acknowledges Muhammad as the final prophet. For the TLP, this issue represented an opening of the doors towards potential blasphemy, but also the inclusion of groups such as the Ahmadiyya into the fold of Islam. So this was the first time that they came into the limelight. What is particularly interesting about this protest that they launched in 2017 is that the protest did not end with a crackdown, but with a signed agreement between the government and the TLP. Now, this agreement was signed between the government and the TLP, but brokered by the military and reportedly also members of the ISI. This indicates some form of state patronage or state acceptance of this movement itself. The movement then again came to the forefront in Pakistan in October 2018 after the acquittal of Asia Bibi, a Christian woman who had been accused of blasphemy. Thousands of after she had been acquitted by the Supreme Court, thousands of TLP supporters descended into various cities in Pakistan, and controversially, some of the leaders of the TLP declared that it would be wajibul qatl, or legitimate to murder Asia Bibi, Supreme Court judges, and in one case, a statement was also made by a leader of the TLP, stating that it would be legitimate for military personnel to mutiny against the un-Islamic sections of the military leadership. Now, yet again in 2018, despite these controversial statements being made, the protest by the TLP was not met with a crackdown, but again an agreement was signed between the government and the TLP again. And if I could just point out one more fact here, there were other groups and movements that were involved in this protest against the acquittal of Asia Bibi in 2018. However, the government chose to sign an agreement with the TLP and not these other movements. Now, this indicates a level of patronage, promotion, acceptance of the TLP as well. And most recently, the TLP is back in the news, was back in the news in November in protest towards depictions of Prophet Muhammad, or caricatures of Prophet Muhammad, or circulation of these caricatures, recirculation of these caricatures in France again. And this time round, it called for, in its protest, it calls for the expulsion of the French ambassador from Pakistan. It called on Pakistan not to send an ambassador to France, and also for a boycott of French goods. And as the pattern dictates, again, there was no crackdown on them, but an agreement was reached between the government and the TLP. Now, I started with this little backdrop because I think that the nature of the protest, the forms of mobilization, and the agreements between the TLP and the government reflect what's sort of new about this movement in itself. This movement, the TLP, signifies a new strand of Barelvi political activism. The Barelvis are a school of thought within Islam that constitute, some people argue, constitutes the majority in Pakistan. We don't really have figures for it, but it's a toss-up between the Barelvis and the Deobandis. Although they probably constitute the majority in Pakistan, they've never really been a political force, unlike their sectarian rivals, if one can use the term, the Deobandis. And so, in a sense, this emergence of the TLP marks a new form of activism on Barelvis, a new form of mobilization of this group. But it also reflects the agreements between the TLP and the government reflects a form of shift of state patronage. Previously, the state had provided patronage to groups associated with the Deoband school of thought and Islamist organizations such as the Jamaat-e-Islami. So now we see a shift towards providing patronage to Barelvi movements. And so I think that this is the key difference we are witnessing now in mobilization by Islamic groups in Pakistan. In terms of ideology, the TLP it stood for elections in 2018. Its electoral campaign focused on three issues: opposition to blasphemy, protection of the honor of Prophet Muhammad, and the protection of Barelvi religious sites. Now, especially with regards to the issue of Barelvi religious sites, one witnesses that this is not an issue for the Barelvis just about, for the TLP at least, not just an issue about Muslims and non-Muslims, but an intra-Islamic contestation as well, because they are pitching themselves as an alternative to Deobandi influence in Pakistan as well. And I should also highlight, right, in the 2018 elections, it actually emerged as the fourth largest party in Pakistan, according to vote share. It didn't really win any seats in the general in the parliament, in the general elections. It won 2 seats in the Sindh assembly elections, but its vote share made it the fourth largest party, and it won a higher percentage of votes than any other established religious party. So I'll stop there. Now I could go on now.
Yeah, thank you. That was a very good perspective, and it will fall in very well with my subsequent questions. But moving on to a very recent development, the party lost its leader, Khadim Hussain Rizvi, recently.
Yes.
And the TLP under Rizvi has been said to be an amalgamation of charisma and religious narrative. What do you think holds in the future for it, as there are reports of a leadership crisis there?
Yes, Khadim Hussain Rizvi was a charismatic individual who managed to employ a very interesting mix of Punjabi humor, colloquial vulgarities, and Persian poetry as well. And of course, he would quote extensively from Islamic jurisprudential literature and the Quran as well. It's hard to replicate a figure like Khadim Hussain Rizvi within the TLP itself. Now, with regards to what's happening on the leadership front, Khadim Hussain Rizvi's son, Saad Hussain Rizvi, has been appointed as the new chief of the TLP. Now, this appointment has actually been challenged, and you rightly allude to news of a leadership tussle going on. The appointment of Saad has been actually challenged by one of the other leading figures within the TLP, Pir Afzal Qadri, who has accused the party of going down the route of nepotism. And he has even accused Saad of actually being mentally unstable and being unqualified as well. So there is this tussle going on. What I would what I would, if I was to put my 2 cents worth of predicting going forward, is that Saad Hussain Rizvi is young, and he does not really have the institutional support of the madrasas and the religious legitimacy that his father could claim. And I suspect what we will see is that he will be pushed to make a public show of his leadership of the TLP. And this would probably play out on the streets again. So I do suspect that what one would find is that in the coming weeks, Saad would call on TLP supporters to come out on the streets again. Probably, if no other issue pops up, probably to reprise their opposition towards the French ambassador, who's not been expelled from Pakistan as yet. So I do see more street protests, and this street protest would be a tool of sort of seeking to legitimize the new leader's position.
Rizvi himself was part of the Barelvi sect, something you alluded to in your first answer, which has been projected as the softer side of Islam. But over the years, he has, of course, taken a hardline approach. And we've seen the Barelvis, along with the Deobandis and the Salafists, also launch anti-Shia campaigns.
Yes.
So what effect has all this had on Pakistan's right-wing political landscape?
Firstly, if I could just, if you could just indulge me for a second, I often find, as a scholar of Islam, I often find that people use the term Sufi, Salafi, and I'm referring here to even to scholars and policy makers as well, without really understanding what these terms mean. And often there's an attempt to show a good face of Islam versus the bad face of Islam, etc. So I would say that each of these terms needs to be used, looked at more critically in itself as well. But coming back to the future of right-wing politics, as you allude to, the prominence that the TLP has gained through the use of social media, new media such as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and its extensive use of WhatsApp, etc. I think this is one thing that right-wing groups are going to be looking at, the forms of mobilization deployed, etc. Their ability to mobilize people is also going to embolden other groups. Now, Khadim Hussain Rizvi was part of a wider strand of Barelvi figures who were emerging as well. So I see those leaders and those movements trying to, even though they might, I'm not saying here that they are going to necessarily agree with him, because there's a huge debate within the Barelvis as well, and there are a number of Barelvi leaders who oppose Khadim Hussain Rizvi very openly as well. But I think the forms of mobilization use the ability that Khadim Rizvi had to unite or try and unite and shape a Barelvi political front. I think these are things that people are going to be looking at. However, I must also add here that unlike in India, where a religious right-wing party has been able to come to power in center, there is no indication of such a possibility in Pakistan. Neither does any religious and right-wing political party in Pakistan actually believe that they can pull off what the RSS and BJP have done in India. They don't have such visions. In fact, if you look at religious political fronts in Pakistan, apart from the TLP, that is, they have always sought to ally themselves with major parties and be secondary players. If one looks at the current political opposition to the Imran Khan-led government, one of the key religious figures involved is Fazlur Rahman, who is the leader of the Jamaat-ul-Islam in Pakistan as well, and he has very closely allied himself to the established non-religious based political parties, and so he's working to it. So it's usually been a model of alliances for religious parties. They don't really believe that they can actually come to power. I should also add here, right, if we're looking to the TLP to see indications of sort of the role of religious parties in politics in the future, the issue of state patronage comes up. The TLP benefited from state and military patronage. Would other religious parties have this? That's a question to look out to. because the rise of the TLP in the way it's risen would not have been possible without various forms of the state allowing it to exist and function in specific ways.
But do you see the right wing parties getting more organized amongst themselves, or as you just mentioned, that they are aligning themselves with non-political parties? So, do you see any organization happening within themselves?
I do not really see any drastically new forms of organizing or uniting among these parties. There's always been or rather, there's been a religious front in Pakistan called the Muttahida Majlis-e-Amal, the MMA, which has existed and then gone dormant and then existed again. It's an amalgamation of various religious-based political parties. And it had varying forms of success in terms of regional, in terms of the state politics, etc. But this front has not been able to marshal a form of unity of sorts between them, because often the contestations are between the parties themselves as well. So I actually foresee religious parties aligning with major parties now, especially with the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz and stuff. So that's the way I see things playing out. I think, I mean, at the end of the day, the TLP, although it emerged as the fourth largest party, did not actually win any seats in the General Assembly. So I too think that if the TLP was to go ahead in the future elections, it would also need to ally itself with other parties.
The TLP also has, very strong views on the blasphemy laws,
Yes.
and the proposed amendments are becoming quite controversial. So, how do you think these changes would affect the minorities in Pakistan?
Firstly, I see it as very unlikely. I would welcome it, but I think it's unlikely to foresee a change in the blasphemy laws in Pakistan. I believe that one of the things the TLP has done is that through its mobilization, it has brought it has brought the issue of blasphemy into more prominence than it was previously, and it's made it a more politically touchy issue itself. So I don't actually see reforms. There are calls to reform in Pakistan, but Imran Khan himself has spoken about not changing the blasphemy laws. So I don't actually see those reforms that some people are saying. And I would like to highlight here as well, these blasphemy laws that are existent in Pakistan do not emerge out of Islamic jurisprudence and do not actually emerge out of the Quran itself. They are actually a vestige of colonial forms of regulation in colonial India and approaches towards ensuring there were no racial religious tensions. Sorry, not racial, but religious tensions. And so there's the irony of the blasphemy laws. But now they've come front and center to political mobilization as well. So I do not foresee too many fundamental changes in this aspect. With regards to minorities, I believe that because of the TLP mobilization, this is an issue that minorities in Pakistan are increasingly concerned about. Anecdotally, people have often said, observers of Pakistan have often pointed out that prior to the recent developments, often when blasphemy cases were brought against individuals, they related to personal vendetta, disputes over land, etc., personal disputes. But there's been a perceptible change in religious overtones to the way the blasphemy law is being employed as well. So yes, many minorities have been very vocal in Pakistan in calling for the blasphemy law to change. I don't think that's going to happen, at least in the near future. Some key figures like Salman Taseer, who was the governor of Punjab previously, who had called for this, had been assassinated, etc. But I would also like to point out here that the blasphemy laws are also often used against other Muslim groups or groups that claim to be within the fold of Islam. And here I'm referring specifically to the Ahmadiyya community, a controversial community in Pakistan that claims to be within the fold of Islam, but is not recognized as being an Islamic group. So the blasphemy laws, in a sense, cut both ways as well. And one more thing we should note about the blasphemy laws in Pakistan is that they lack clarity. So what exactly constitutes blasphemy is not really defined. So that's another issue that concerns minorities and other groups within the Islamic fold as well.
And finally, I'd like to ask you about Pakistan's role in the Islamic world. It seems that, Pakistan on one hand is trying to project a softer Islamic image to the world for political and economic advantages. But on the other hand, it is also trying to become a leader of a so-called alternative Muslim grouping comprising of Turkey, Malaysia, and some other countries. How do you view this? Do you think there's a dichotomy or is there a convergence?
I will start by saying that one should not assume that the TLP and organizations like them represent the whole of Pakistan as well. Pakistan is a diverse and vibrant country. There are very vibrant strands of, want a better term, Islamic modernism, etc., that do exist and are very influential as well. Forms of mystical Islam are incredibly popular, etc., as well. Having said that, Imran Khan's government is trying to position itself very interestingly. On one hand, it is trying to position itself, as you rightly point out, as a not just representing a specific face of Islam, but also Imran Khan is seeking to position himself as a spokesperson for Islam, spokesperson for Muslim issues as well. And interestingly, here there's an India-Pakistan angle as well, because for him, he wants to highlight the marginalization of minorities in India as well. And herein lies and he also wants to highlight Islamophobia in other parts of the world, but herein lies a selectiveness as well, because he's not willing to talk about Xinjiang and what's happening with Muslims in China as well. So there is a paradox in his own positioning in that sense as well. But also this whole taking up speaking about causes of the Muslims globally, etc., that Imran Khan is aspiring to do, it's also related to a repositioning of Pakistan within the Muslim world, not just in South Asia. Now, this was done by Zulfikar Ali Bhutto previously, etc. So this is now looking back or kind of replicating that model as well, to position Pakistan in the Muslim world as well. And I would also like to come back to the issue of state patronage as well. Often when the Pakistani establishment provides patronage to certain right-wing and groups, this is not necessarily a reflection of their religious views or religious positioning, but a sort of positioning with regards to geopolitical interests within Pakistan and without as well. So, in a sense, this is the paradox that Pakistan faces. I should also highlight that at a personal, at a level of looking at Imran Khan's own religious views, they have evolved over time as well. And he himself seems to embody a sort of contradiction of views on Islam. On one hand, he exposes certain views of Islam extremely conservative, and on the other hand, he speaks in terms of Islamic modernism as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iqbal, for this wonderful conversation. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You were listening to South Asia Chat. To learn more about our work, visit us at isas.nus.edu.sg.